Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how Angela Rayner, as Community Secretary, is on a mission to counter Reform UK and specifically the violence against their own communities they incite by better connecting people with those communities. People who feel integrated within their own communities, having their needs met, do not feel the need to attack them. You don't spit on your own doorstep. So how does Rayner aim to instill this community pride in the people Reform UK are persuading to attack their own? But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So first of all, apologies if you can hear a hum in the background. Some people have got no respect for my schedule. But anyway, this is the battle. Reform UK are seeking to divide communities for votes. Labour are seeking to unite them for stability in order to give them the space to improve the economy and make sure people's standard of living starts to improve again. Angela Rayner has identified 75 towns across Britain where far-right propaganda and right-wing government policies have combined to create the conditions for major civil unrest of the sort we saw with the Farage riots last year. Rayner is the cabinet minister in charge of housing, but also communities. I've said before, an absolutely crucial brief, essential that she succeeds if Labour are to win over a lot of the moderate support that swung to Reform UK of late. But let's begin with the problem before looking at the scale of the challenge with the solution. How does Nigel Farage's divisive rhetoric cause so much damage to community cohesion that it needs this effort from the government to take out, frankly, one of the country's most destructive traitors? Well, these community divisions didn't begin with Farage, just like MAGA feeling didn't begin with Trump. They began because governments just didn't see community cohesion as something which might be threatened. Governments focus very much on the macroeconomics, so even governments which do want to make things better for people still have that zoomed out view of things. So no great attention was paid to demographic changes coming, how communities might react to them. Sure, some strategists might have looked at it in terms of voting patterns, but not in terms of the fundamental fabric of society. As some, particularly industrial and coastal towns, lost chunks of their main economy in manufacturing and tourism respectively, and with the push for more people to go to university, you created a sort of economic storm where those young people, after graduating, would get a job somewhere else. They wouldn't return home because good jobs weren't as plentiful. And that led to not just a skills drain from those areas, but a wealth drain. Young people were leaving and both earning and spending their money elsewhere, which naturally changed the nature of the towns they left behind, economically and politically, because you skewed it more towards the parts of the population that vote a particular way. And that sets something in motion, a slow erosion of trust, years of economic hardship, the feeling of being ignored by Westminster, and a sense that the country was changing in ways that they not only didn't recognise, but didn't feel that they would benefit from. And for a lot of them, the promises of mainstream parties, Conservative and Labour, rung hollow. Voters here cite stagnant wages, housing crisis, rising cost of living as proof that the system is failing them. And into this vacuum of disillusionment steps Nigel Farage with a very simple, very powerful message that taps directly into that frustration. It's a message that blames immigration for strained public services and an out-of-touch political elite for the country's problems. And for people who feel like they haven't been listened to for decades, that's a very potent combination. Then people see Farage pretending to care about their plight, and just as Americans did with Trump, they think they have a champion. They were persuaded to then blame immigration. Then the liberal elite, as they see us, told them, no, you're wrong, you're just being racist. That creates the them and us mentality. So they felt they're being talked down to, marginalised. After all, if the problem's not immigration, well, why aren't the powers fixing what the real problem is then? And it's incredibly difficult to tell them that the real problem is the billionaires paying Farage and the Tories alike, when literally every source of news that they come across says it's immigrants. And because people think all these sources are independent, they don't realise they're all owned by like 3 billionaires. The truth becomes outnumbered. That's Farage's trump card, if you pardon the expression. The more you attack anti-immigration sentiment as racist or even just xenophobic, the more the people you're trying to persuade feel that you're demonising them, talking down to them. And Farage, having lit the fuse, need only stand back and watch the ensuing scrap. Then there's the behaviour at local council level after their wins early this year, attacking DEI roles, even though there aren't really any, removing pride flags. Now, for some people, oh, it's just common sense, isn't it? For some, it's not worth making a fuss about. But for others, it's a message that they're not welcome in their own community. What Reform UK are doing is targeting not just one group, but several groups, and making them all feel that the rest of their community is hostile against them. It's the very ancient strategy of divide and rule. And I think there's another factor which you don't see discussed much. The pattern of life is very different to when I was a lad. Like socialising in your community was baked in back then. Now it isn't. People, I mean, they went to the pub, like in my village, there were 13 pubs. That's in a Yorkshire Pit village. It's not anymore. People spend more time at home. It's not just pubs either. Community events in general are less frequent in these sorts of towns. And if you do go out for dinner or something like that, you might actually try. You go in the car, more people have cars. You're probably more likely to go some distance away. So you're not in amongst your neighbours. So that sort of natural, whether it's in the pub or elsewhere, you know, that sort of natural need to get out of the house. And therefore, although socialising wasn't necessarily the primary aim, that's nonetheless what happened. But because our homes are and our lives in general are better catered to our needs, we sort of live in more of a bubble. There's less need to go out to places where you will just naturally socialise. And I think that's also accelerated the disconnect and feeling of isolation. What's happening here, it's not an accident, it's a strategy. Reform UK have consistently used polarising language to frame national debates, pushing mainstream parties to adopt harsher stances to avoid losing votes. The party's hardline policies, like a freeze on non-essential migration, as they call it, withdrawing from the European Convention on Human Rights, they're designed to create clear dividing lines. And the rhetoric is then amplified online, where partisan accounts can spread divisive content and reinforce the idea of an us versus them battle for, like, the soul of the nation. And the far right have had a well-established, funded and carefully internationally coordinated support network for many years now. The far right got serious about communications, including on social media, a long time ago. The left and liberals alike are not even just playing catch-up. We haven't even dragged our arse to the starting blocks yet. No one is taking it seriously. We're still not taking communication seriously. This isn't even just about Labour, just groups in general. Liberal and left groups in general do not take communication seriously. These tactics from the far right have been incredibly effective. They mobilise a disaffected base that feels left behind, but the cost is paid here on the ground in towns across, particularly the north of England, North Midlands and North Wales, but other areas as well. It's measured, you've had, I mean, what did we have since Brexit? Broken friendships, broken family relationships, silent streets, rising tide of suspicion. It turns neighbours into political opponents and transforms complex societal problems into simple blame-filled slogans. So what to do about it? Well, I discussed just before the election, Keir Starmer was actually asked about this very thing in an interview. And he said the way to counter Reform UK, give people real improvements to their lives. There was no abstract philosophy, no sociological thesis, no G7 bollocks. No, when it came to the specific problem of Reform UK's populism, make people's lives better was his response. And now Angela Rayner is one of those accepting that mission. She launched her plan for neighbourhoods earlier this summer. 75 of the highest risk towns with a £1.5 billion fund to provide, as she described them, real improvements people can see on their doorstep. Which translates into an average of about £20 million a town. That is on top of the other initiatives, of course. They're not trying to solve this with 20 million quid. I'm guessing that these 75 towns will also be very much amongst the first of the 1,000 to get their Sure Start centres returned and upgraded in 2027, as well as the community health services. Now, this £20 million is on top of all the other regeneration efforts, and specifically for plans to improve community cohesion and tackle poverty, the fuel of the populist. But it's clear that Labour have another string to this bow as well. So if you read Rayner's forward to the plan, you notice something else. She talks about the neglect of the Tories over 14 years and how John Prescott before her revitalised local communities. That's more than just party political bashing. Farage delivers a narrative that established politics fails these people. That's Labour as well as the Conservatives. But in actual fact, that's not really true. I'm not saying there wasn't anyone left behind by the last Labour government. There absolutely was. But there were a lot of people brought forward. And by talking up the achievements of the last Labour government, what Rayner is doing here is saying, look, There is actually only one half of the established politics that neglects you. That is because Labour also need time to put these plans in place. She wouldn't need to go for that tactic if she could just click her fingers and make this appear next year. Even if this plan for neighbourhoods, it works, it's still part of a 10-year plan. It's part of their decade of renewal, right? But people are impatient. Another benefit Farage has is that meaningful change actually takes time. You can tell people you can do it overnight. You actually can't. You can demolish a building in one morning. It takes you 2 years to build its replacement. The Tories spent 14 years demolishing the country, egged on by Farage. Labour need to not only deliver quickly, but also inspire more patience for the big stuff, which cannot be magicked out of thin air. I've put a link in the description below if you'd like to see the 75 towns mentioned across Scotland, England and Wales, as well as other details. Yes, it does include Clacton. The first Farage will probably notice of it is when he goes campaigning there again at the next general election. Let us hope his constituents noticed it somewhat before. But let me know what you think in the comments below. For more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.